So today's program is part of the Wegland Center here at Cal Poly Pomona. So our director is someone that we need to acknowledge because he's organizing and working with me to put on these, these great events and have these great speakers, come and speak to our students and the two people on Zoom. The Wegland family is donated money to establish an endowment. So Mitchie and Walter Wegland experienced a lot of trauma in their lives. Mitchie, as a child, experienced Japanese internment camps, Japanese American internment camps here in the United States. And Walter escaped the Holocaust as a child. So given all the trauma that they endured in their childhood, in their adulthood, when they became successful, they decided to get involved in civil rights and social justice. So they established this endowment, the Wegland, here at Cal Poly Pomona, so we can have programs that reflect diversity, social justice, and civil rights, things that they believed in. So today, it's going to be more of a dialogue of y'all getting to know Rubén Guevara and his legacy, and a documentary his son made about him. I hope my son's watching this so he can do one about me, but that's a different story. So we're going to start with the two clips of the documentary. So I think it's PBS, right? So PBS documentary, it's won awards. It's something that is very important to highlight, this legendary performer that hasn't received the attention in terms of nationally and globally that he should. So that's why we're here to uplift his legacy, and he's written books. He's performed throughout the United States and elsewhere. So we're going to start with two short clips of the documentary, and then Senior Rubén Guevara, he'll talk a little bit about his life, about his performance, or different capacities in terms of being a performer, a poet, and so on and so forth. So take it away.
The Chicanos, we're not completely accepted in Mexico, and we're certainly not in the United States. Then where do we belong? Maybe we belong everywhere.
The work of making us visible, that's part of the movement. Rubén Guevara has been doing that since he was a kid.
He is an American hero.
A legend, a cultural icon.
The Chicano godfather.
And he's my hero.
Is that culture enough for you?
Artbound on Safos. New season now streaming on KCET.
We're going to start a little bit about Rubén, talking about his life and who he is. And then Ruben III, he'll talk about the documentary. So, and then when the audio is fixed, and then we'll show it in the end.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Have enough, people.
Are we awake yet, or are we still sleeping, or what's up? Well, thank you for inviting me. I thought I really appreciate it. Well, my life, it's been a roller coaster ride of starts and finish, starts, stops. But I persevered, kept on going. I started around 1961. I put on my first record. And I had a duo called the Apollo Brothers. We did doo-wop R&B. We played all over. We played the El Monte Legion Stadium. It was a famous mecca for rock and roll R&B in the 60s and 50s. What was really unique about that place was that in that time, in the 50s and 60s, dances in LA City were prohibited, and because they were mixing of too many cultures. So El Monte was available, and Art LeBeau, a famous DJ, started having bands there, concerts there, where everybody from LA County could come, black, white, Asian, what have you. So it was the first time that LA had people that could dance together from different races at the El Monte Legion Stadium. Unfortunately, it closed down back in '73. And my old band, Ruben And The Jets, was the last band to play there. So I have a long history of performing in LA, going back to the 60s as a singer. In '65, I got an audition on a famous television show called Shindig. It was a national TV show, ABC. We'll see maybe a clip of that. It's a big breakthrough for me. I was the first Chicano to ever play on that broadcast in '65. I was on the bill with Tina Turner, a pioneer of rock and roll, Diddley. It was a big deal for me. It was like my big breakthrough, but it was the one catch. I had to change my name. Evidently, the producer of the series had a beef with a singer that was on there before from England, a guy named P.J. Proby. He was actually from Austin, Texas. So the producer said, "Yeah, you're great. After the audition, you're great. Yeah, you're on. We're going to have you as a regular." Okay, cool. But one thing, you got to change your name. I said, "What's wrong with my name? I like Rubén Guevara. What's wrong with that?" "No, we want you to change it to J.P. Moby." I said, "What?" "I like Rubén Guevara. What's wrong with that?" I said, "Well, we like J.P. Moby." Now, I didn't know at the time that the producers had a beef with this guy. So they were using me to get back at him. I found this out later. I did the show. It was great. I was supposed to come back as a regular, and the show gets canceled. So that was the first crash, '65. I got burned down with rock and roll, too many dead ends. And then later in '68, I went to see a concert at the Sound Auditorium with a famous rock and roll musician, writer named Frank Zappa. He was debuting an album called Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets. It was a conceptual album of a garage doo-wop band from out here, El Monte. Actually, Pomona. He used to live in Pomona. Frank did. I went to see the concert because they were featuring doo-wop music in the album, and I was curious because at the time it was crazy acid rock. At the time there was no doo-wop music anymore. Doo-wop, for those of you who don't know, it's vocal group harmony, and the themes are always usually about romance. So I was curious to see what this crazy psychedelic rock and roller had to do about doo-wop. I went to see him, and they were great. I managed to get backstage, and I wanted to congratulate him and thank him for doing that, bringing back doo-wop music. And he said, "Oh, yeah, well, thank you." I said, "By the way, my name is Ruben, and I used to sing doo-wop back in the day." He said, "Are you still recording? Do you have any demos?" I said, "Yeah, I do, but he said, dropping by the office sometime." So that was the plan, to go by there and drop off my demos. I didn't do it because at the time I was studying classical music. I wanted to become a film composer. I was at LA City College. Making a long story short, I ran into a friend of his that used to play in his band. We went up to see him that night at his house. Frank and I were up all night playing records. Then he at 5 in the morning asked me, "How would you like to stage a real Ruben and the Jets?" I told him, "Frank, I don't know. There's too many dead ends in rock and roll. I'm serious about becoming a film composer." He said, "Well, too many detours, huh? Well, why don't you build your own roads?" I thought about that. I said, "Huh, that sounds cool. Build my own roads." I thought I could use his fan base. It's already there. So I went ahead with the project. He said he would produce the first album and we could be the opening band on the road with him, his band. I did that, did a couple of albums. They went pretty well, didn't sell a lot, but we toured the country. One of the first times a Chicano band from East LA toured the country. After El Chicano, they were really the first. So that was, opened up the country to Chicano music, Chicano rock and roll, and that was cool. Anyway, that's short-lived. And then decided what am I going to do next? In '71, I wrote a musical called Who Are the People? This is right before I met Frank for the second time. And it was a gospel rock cantata. And it was about the people. It was the middle of the Vietnam War. And I wanted to write something about in opposition to the war. So this was about that. Had a gospel choir, a big band, 2 dancers. So it was a protest piece. And that was my introduction to theater. And I really loved it. You could put dance in there, you could put music in there, you can put your message in there. And that was going to be my direction. But then I met Frank, and Frank offered me this Ruben and the Jets thing. I thought, well, that could be like Chicano rock theater. So I did that. Okay. That crashed in 74, 75. Took a trip to Mexico, sold my car, thought I'd do a pilgrimage to the pyramids. I was taking Chicano studies at LA City College. And I decided to go to Mexico and do my, the whole roots thing. Check out my ancestry in that. I had indigenous ancestry on both sides of my mother and my father. So we're going to see a clip of that experience where I climbed this pyramid in Palenque. And I have this epiphany, I have this vision of becoming a Chicano culture sculptor to create Chicano experience through music, theater, literature. So I wrote a piece called CS, con Safos, with a band that I had at the time. And we're going to hear that later. Okay, that was what? That was the 70s. I continued with theater. And in the 80s, I had this band con Safos. We played all over LA. I brought a Dia de los Muertos, a Mexican Day of the Dead show to Hollywood for the first time. Prince was in the house, which was very cool. And so my career was, kind of moving in the musical theater direction. In 2011, a mentor of mine, Johnny Otis, he was a pioneer of LA R&B. He passed away. And I went to his memorial service. And in front of me were 2 scholars, George Lipsitz, he was a chair of ethnic studies at UC San Diego and later Santa Barbara, and a scholar, Josh Kuhn. And George gave this incredible testimonial about Johnny Otis, and it really blew my mind. I said, wow, man, what a great story. And that was when I decided to write my autobiography. So I told George and Josh that day, he says, okay, I'm going to start my autobiography. That was 2012. By 2018, I finally got a publishing deal with University of California. They published my book, Confessions of a Radical Chicano Doo-Wop Singer. Yeah, that's the book there. Came out in 2018. Pick it up if you can. It's still UC Press, University of California Press. Amazon has it as well, but I don't get royalties from Amazon, so go to the UC Press. Anyway, I toured the country, and what was interesting about the tour, I did a book talk at San Jose State about 2019. And after the meeting, after the talk, there was a group meeting with the students from the Chicano Studies Department. And I noticed there were a couple of Asian kids there. I was curious, I asked them, how come you guys are taking Chicano Studies? He said, well, I live in a Chicano neighborhood, this one kid said, and I like the way they party, I like the way they protest, I like the way they organize. I want to become a Chicano. I said, all right, man, cool. I did a talk at UC San Diego, and the same thing happened. There was a group talk afterwards, and there were a couple of Asian kids, and I asked the kid, how come you're taking Chicano Studies? He said, I want to be like a Chicano. I want to organize. I want to make my community stronger. All the good things about being a Chicano, and it blew my mind. I said, wow, my mission was accomplished. I was able to connect. Chicano is a Mexican-American activist. It's not a term of ethnicity, it's a political term. During the 60s, the Chicano student movement, the students flipped the word Chicano. Originally, it was kind of a derogatory term that the upper classes of Mexico gave to the lower classes. But the Chicano students decided to flip it and make it a term of empowerment. So Chicano became a term of pride and commitment to better your community, whether it be through education, a lawyer, doctor, teacher, whatever. Commitment to the community to build it up. And that's what I've been. I've been doing that the rest of my life. So I think again, Alfaro to invite me to talk about it. And my son, my son decided to make a documentary about my life back in, what was it, 2021? Something like that.
October 2021.
There you go. So I'll turn it over to him as to why he decided to make the documentary and all that stuff.
But before you do, can you explain to the class what a Chicano culture sculptor is? Because that's kind of your
Okay,
title.
you're gonna see a clip when I climbed a pyramid in Mexico at Palenque. And when I got to the top, I proclaimed that I was a Chicano, born in the US, but of Mexican heritage. And so Chicano culture sculptor is someone that creates artworks, sculpture pieces about the Chicano experience. So I dubbed myself a Chicano culture sculptor. Got it? Okay. I heard a Frank Zappa record called Cruising with Ruben and the Jets. At first, it kind of offended me. And then I read the liner notes and it said, the present day Pachuco refuses to die. I thought, how does this guy know about Pachucos? So I went and I checked him out. I went to the concert, then I got it. Ruben and the Jets was rock theater.
Just bear in mind some of the important things that you have to discuss with these people. One of them might be puppets.
I was impressed and I decided I wanted to go backstage and congratulate him, to meet him. I walk in and I tell him, hey, Frank, thank you for doing doo-wop, doing all this crazy acid rock. And I said, by the way, my name is Rubén. And I used to sing a little doo-wop back in the day. And he just looks at me and says, oh, Rubén, huh?
And what I love about that was not, him saying to Zappa, like, you're fake or you're appropriating. It was like, hey, I see that you love this and you're making this kind of tribute. But I'm from this culture and I know these streets and I know this music and I know these people. Why don't you let me become part of that performance? And so he became really part of a kind of, I see it as like an extended Zappa performance that then took on a life of its own where his musical career took on a new chapter.
When I think about Rubén Guevara's group, Ruben and the Jets, I really hear soul in there. It's rock, but it's also got like definite soul influences.
It wasn't doo-wop. It was rock and roll. It was hippie doo-wop. It was kind of like Summer of Love doo-wop. A Million Scarves. He represented that Chicano freedom, that new neo-Chicano.
Put a band together and started writing some songs with Frank. We had some pretty big gigs with some pretty big names like T-Rex, Big Dog Night, Doobie Brothers. We even played Royal Stadium, Kansas City, over 40,000 people. That was a trip. But there was this one club in New York, Max's Kansas City. And the marquee, it read, Bruce Springsteen and the East Street Band, Bob Marley and the Wailers, and Ruben and the Jets. Not bad company, man. So Frank and I are working on the second album, and we decided to call it Con Safos. Con Safos is it's a term that is part of Pachuco Chicano graffiti culture. And it means exempt from danger. And it was the first album cover by a major record label to feature Chicano graffiti art.
the biggest art that was happening at that time was album art. So I like the album covers.
Everything about this record. I mean, obviously the songs are fantastic. You can really hear the the doo-wop influence, early R&B influence. The cover art is so important. Again, like positioning him in place, right? Standing underneath the sign of Soto, against a wall where there's tags, right? So that this record becomes an additional tag. The songs become kind of sonic tags on the wall of Los Angeles.
He was making decisions about how he wanted to present himself. Even though he wanted to push ahead within the music industry, that takes a kind of, cultural bravery.
I got a 52 Chevy, how was that?
I wanted to go check out the ancient ruins of Palenque, Chiapas. So I was looking for the bus station, and I asked this older gentleman on the street for direction. He asked me where I'm from. I was saying, Los Angeles. He looks at me like I'm some kind of lowlife and says, "Oh, you're one of those American pochos." I tell him, "No, I'm Chicano." He says, "Even worse, Chicanos don't have a culture. They're mongrels." I was so shocked, I didn't know what to say. A couple of days after my encounter with that old guy in Guadalajara, I made it over to Palenque. Man, that place really blew my mind. I felt this intense connection to my ancestors, journey of my family, all leading up to my life at that moment. I decided to climb the Temple of the Inscriptions. And as I'm climbing, all these questions start coming up in my head like, what does it mean to be a Chicano artist? How can I make a difference with my work? What should I be doing with my life? Then I kind of had this epiphany. A Chicano artist would be someone who uses creativity to contribute to their culture and help shape it, kind of like a sculptor. That's when I knew. I knew what I was going to do, and I knew what I was, a Chicano culture sculptor.
Because my dad is a very humble guy, and won't tell you that he was like one of the first brown musicians featured on television. So in the 1960s, you basically had black artists, you had white artists, but brown and yellow wasn't really a thing yet. And Shindig came around. That was kind of the hullabaloo of the 60s. And my dad was featured on there along with Bo Diddley and Tina Turner. And from there, he kind of whet his appetite as to, what he could do in Hollywood. But the caveat was that he had to change his name to J.P. Moby. So he was already whitewashed at the ripe age of 20. So that was his first foray into Hollywood, and understanding as a Mexican American, you didn't have a lot of leeway in terms of shaping your own identity. And so his life story is really about trying to find out what it means to be Chicano, what it means to be Mexican American in a place where America didn't want him. And when he found out in his early 30s that Mexico also didn't want him. So in that cartoon that you were maybe able to see, he goes to Guadalajara on this pilgrimage to Mexico to discover his roots, right? He knew he was Chicano in the United States, but he wanted to figure out what it meant to be Chicano in Mexico. So he goes down there, and this guy sees him on the street, and he's like, "What are you?" And he responds, "I'm Chicano." and they didn't really know what that was down there at the time. That dialogue between Mexico and the United States hadn't really taken shape yet. So the man tells him that Chicanos are basically mongrels. They're just biological mistakes. And that really is a turning point for him to come back to the United States and show Mexicanos what Chicanos and what Chicanismo was all about. So really this documentary was us trying to tell his life story, which you heard in pieces, but also what the evolution of Chicano identity really amounted to. And so there's other people in this documentary that you may have heard about. This is a Chicano studies course. Okay, so you must know some big Chicano, like I'm sure you know Cheech and Chong by now. So Cheech is in this film, for example. He's one of our lead interviewees. Chaz Bojorquez, who's a very famous graffiti artist. Alice Bag of the Bags, a very famous Chicanx punk rocker. Lot of characters. And what we were trying to do with this documentary was trying to announce to the world not just my father's story, but the story of Chicano identity and how that started in the 60s, but then in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was really this mix of art and commerce and just trying to figure out like what are we in relation to these other white people, but what are we also in relation to our neighbors down south. And what we do at the end of this is my dad really makes it a point to bring artists together from both places, from the United States, but also in Mexico, so that they can create art together and start to really have that dialogue that started in the 70s of people assuming that Chicanos were mongrels, and at least having them understand that no, we are our own thing, we're not monolithic, and we make art, we write books, we create change here too. So really it was a story about my father's sort of misgivings in the Hollywood industry and how he was treated, but also how he turned those indignities into something that was positive and generated a dialogue between the two communities. So we're really proud of this film. It started in 2018. He completed this book, Confessions of a Radical Chicano Doo-Wop Singer. If you have a chance to watch the documentary, it's for free. It's on YouTube. You just do a search for Con Safos PBS, and Alvaro will show it in class, and there might be some extra clips that we can do for extra credit. But there's not a lot of documentaries about Chicano artists, and so our big thing was we tried to cram a lot of big artists. Like, it's crazy that Alice doesn't have a documentary. It's crazy that Chaz doesn't have one. It's crazy that Cheech doesn't have one. He has one with Cheech and Chong, but Cheech himself has been this big philanthropist, really, and the sole Chicano art collector in the United States. He really put Chicano art on the map and brought my dad along on his films to make music, but also to do press conferences like this. So really it was just to showcase all these Chicanos who have kind of worked together throughout the last 50 years, and to see like where that has netted out, so to speak. And now you have Chicano studies classes because of these people. You have sort of big name artists. You can have a Selena Gomez now because of the work these people did. So there's all these downstream effects that they don't get credit for, but we wanted to, my dad is in his 80s now. We wanted to have this out there. It's really too bad it's all kind of coinciding with the Trump administration, who is trying to continually silence, sideline, and erase our history and erase us, literally erasing us by taking us off the streets and putting us in Salvadorian gulags. And that's the work, right? You have to keep making us visible. You have to keep supporting other artists that are trying to put their necks out and do this work when they don't get a lot of money in return. Part of this story is like how much work my dad put into this, and would check his bank account and wasn't sure if he was going to be able to, pay the rent the next month. And so really as like a cultural warrior and as a cultural, soldier on the ground, really put in a lot of time so that, you guys could have these classes and have these discussions. So, yeah. Do you have any other? Yeah, so, okay. Alvaro's brother, I don't know if you're familiar with him. Okay, yeah, I went to film school. I may not look it, but I am almost 40. And I went around the time of the global financial crisis in 2008. So not a great time to go to school, but it did teach me about, a lot of the networking that people talk about within school. A lot of my friends, I went to NYU, so that was a lot of people who had connections. And I didn't understand why my parents really wanted me to go to New York. I wanted to stay close to home. I had a girlfriend here. I didn't want to leave. And it was like the best decision, that I think I made, going to a different place and just getting a fresh perspective and seeing that there were Mexicans in New York too. I didn't know that was a thing back then. And yeah, just the series of connections I was able to make there. A lot of people that I went to school with, I ended up working with later. The documentary crew that we had, a lot of them were people I went to high school with. So, some of the people that are next to you in this room, you might find yourselves working together in 10, 15 years. Keep each other's contact info because you never know what can happen. But yeah, so I came back to LA. I started working for Warner Brothers, very small company. That was around 2010. I was a PA on a movie called Crazy Stupid Love with Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell. Then I got to do Interstellar with Chris Nolan. That was a lot of fun. I did the Entourage movie, Hangover Part 2. It was great, working on these big Hollywood films, but these were all kind of centered around, white characters and white stories. And I just wanted to do one for us. And so, luckily, the good people at KCT, which is now PBS SoCal, the CEO at the time was a big Frank Zappa fan. And if you're familiar with Frank Zappa, he had an album called Ruben And The Jets. And that's my father, because his name was Ruben, and because he did doo-wop already, he had seen Frank perform. Frank heard a little bit of what he did. And so my dad became the real Ruben And The Jets for the next two albums. And where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So the CEO of PBS was just like, sure, you can do it. And we were like, oh, we don't have a budget. We don't have a crew. And he was like, yeah, but you have a great story. Like, I believe in you. You just go figure it out. So we literally did a Facebook fundraiser. I think the amount we were hoping for was $5,000 without realizing that these films cost at least $100,000. But from there, other people found out about the fundraiser and they gave whatever they could. One person was a teacher on a small salary, gave us $500. And that was just because of the goodwill, my father had built up over time within Boyle Heights, East LA, and even Little Tokyo, where he where he used to live as well. So we were able to raise about 15 on our own. KCT came back and gave us 65. So it ended up costing a little under 100 to make it, which is not indicative of most documentaries. I just want to point out they're usually over 500 or 600. So we made this for very little money. You'll find that there's a lot of music in here that shouldn't be in there, by El Chicano and God, who else did we use in this? War, Zappa himself, which probably would cost about $1 million if you added up all the licensing and royalties. Well, KCT has a blanket license with BMI, so we were able to put them in. But if we did this independently, we'd probably still be working on it and we'd still be raising the money. But anyways, to make a long story short, I love saying that. After this came out, I started to think about this cross-cultural connection that was happening between Chicanos and Japanese Americans, specifically between Little Tokyo and Boyle Heights. And if you know anything about these two communities and these two cultures, Boyle Heights, prior to the incarceration of the Japanese Americans, was the only place in LA where Chicanos, African Americans, Japanese Americans, and Jewish Americans could live, because there was a little thing called redlining, and you basically could not live on the west side if you weren't a white American. And so, within that sprung out a lot of cross-cultural relationships, a lot of cross-cultural art and music, food. So this project that I'm working on now is called Far East LA, and it's about those two cultures coming together. And a lot of that was inspired by work that my dad did within the Japanese community when he lived in Little Tokyo. But also just like going back to the 1940s during the Mexican-American repatriation movement, it coincided with the Japanese-American incarceration after Pearl Harbor, and that, it's very cyclical, right? All these people, they're talking about now putting in camps. That stuff you would think would be part of the dustbin of history, but it's happening again. So we thought this was like a perfect time to make that project. And Solomon Huerta, who is Alvaro's brother, is featured because he comes from Boyle Heights, but also he was kind of a mentor to this Japanese Mexican artist named Shizu Saldamondo, who I believe has spoken here before, and she's featured in it as well. We also have a few of the guys from a band called Ozomatli. You might not know, but their percussionist is Japanese American. Their lead singer was born in Boyle Heights, and their lead saxophonist is married to a Japanese woman. So a lot of cross-cultural stuff happening there. And it should be on PBS next year. I'll share a link with Alvaro, hopefully when that's done. And if I can send previews over to your class, I will. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
That was fantastic. So what we'll do is with the editing, we'll incorporate the clips. That's the great thing about editing, as you know. So we can have the two Rubens right here. Can you give me one? That extra one? So I'm just going to open it up for Q&A. And it's just going to, like I said, just more informal, more conversationless.
Check one, check. Check one, check.
Okay, first one. Not all at once. I'm telling you. Y'all got to learn, people. Future PhD right here.
Check one.
All right, this is for Ruben Sr. When you were doing your, when you were participating in your musical escapade and just in the music industry. Sorry, how do I phrase this? Did you incorporate any sorry, I'm like blanking out today. No caffeine, but so did any of your music involve with you being like Chicano, like any like emphasis on it, like any depth? Like,
yeah, I did. When I was with the Jets, when we toured the country, we did a second album called Safos. And Safos is a term. It goes back to the 30s. When you write your tag on the wall, you would put a C/S beneath it, and that protected your name. Nobody could write anything against it. If they did, it would go back to them, like a kind of like a talisman, kind of like a protection symbol. So that album itself was a very strong Chicano statement. This is 73. And there's the first graffiti album ever put out by a major label, Mercury Records. So that was a very strong Chicano statement. And there are tunes in there that do reflect about growing up in East LA. So we did talk a lot about that, about growing up Mexican-American Chicano. The musical style was R&B, rock and roll, and doo-wop as well. Those were the forms of music that were very popular in our community. So I kept that in part of the mix. But there's a tune that we didn't play that, I don't know if we can still play it, but after I did that climb at the pyramid in Mexico, I was determined to create music, literature, theater, based on the Chicano experience. And I wrote one of the first, one of the first spoken word tunes or songs. Actually, some people call it the first rap song, where I speak about the history of the of Mexico, of the Aztecs, of the Maya, the Olmeca, and how we are now here in LA, a people in that nation. So I've always kept a thread of Chicano experience in my work, especially after that experience in Mexico of climbing the pyramid. So, yeah, that's part of my DNA.
Just say before we ask the next question, yeah, we'll show it. Thank you. Okay, yeah, you go ahead. So we have a.
So I'm just curious, because this is not something we've ever talked about, but for this other project I'm doing, I've kind of been thinking about it. At your age, where you grew up, knowing you were Mexican American, did your cohort of peers think music could be the way out of like poverty, or like were you even thinking about it that way, or were you just like, I just want to do this? Because for a lot of stars or like athletes that come out of the quote unquote ghetto, like the arts are sometimes the only lane you can use to get out quickly or rapidly.
Okay. No, after my experience on Shindig and working on some films, I did some work in films. I saw how rotten the film industry was in Hollywood and the music industry. I don't want to have any part of it. So I wasn't looking for stardom. I was looking to pay the rent, of course, but I always had a day job, and I did my work at night or wherever I could. So I was never looking for stardom, and I still am not. I mean, if it wasn't for my son, I wouldn't have a documentary. Thank God for him that he picked up on the idea of bringing the story out. But my life has always been about just making it as truthful as possible about my experience, others' experience, especially the Japanese American experience. And I respect that culture a lot, what they've gone through. I mean, being incarcerated without due process for 4 years in camps all over the country, in deserts and mountains. It was horrible. They lost their businesses, they lost everything. But anyway, so no, I'm not a star guy. But it's funny, like look at this albums that I've done, this gentleman over here. Who knows? What's going to happen down the line? You're recognized somewhere, somehow, or whatever, what you have done. So it's not about the money. It's about the art. It's but the heart.
Well, this is honestly, it's a very it's an amazing experience. You know, being here with like honor having a senior here. This is oral history, people. This is like being documented, and to me, whatever technical issues, it doesn't matter. It's the magic of editing. Our brilliant media vision is going to take care of that for us. But the most important thing is that we're documenting and we're listening to the oral history of someone who is like a pioneer, like Ruben III here was talking about being like one of the few and the only brown person to perform. We all know like Santana, for example, because he's mainstream. Like everybody knows Santana and has a lot of money. If anybody knows him, let me know because I need a loan. But there's a lot of people that came before him, and even like someone like Ruben Sr. coming from El Norte is different than coming from like Tijuana where Santana came. And for me, it's to recognize those stories. So I was in the mid 1980s when I was at UCLA. I was 7 years old. I was like a child prodigy. Like in 1985, 86, around there, I was listening to his albums. And that's the first time I heard someone, I love Santana. But he doesn't talk about like being Chicano. You know, like it's the first time somebody like in their album talking about LA and about being Chicano and that identity. And even within that song, he's talking about LA. He's also talking about the Japanese, you know, in their experiences. So it's about bringing these cultures, you know, together. And I must say, I thought I was good looking, man. For someone in his 80s to look better looking than me, I mean, that's a compliment. I mean, most people in their 80s right now, they're like cutting coupons and, you know, watching reruns of Oprah. So this is really someone who's a fighter, and it's just a beautiful story that his son, also very humble. I mean, going to NYU film school, that's an amazing and accomplishment itself, right? And then to turn around and say, I could be successful, make a lot of money in Hollywood, which is great, but I want to do something for my father. That's legacy, people. So I want to see for y'all, all you young people, actually Ruben looks like he could be your age, like, is to see these examples of what you do in your lives, young lives, and your careers, and to honor your parents, and somehow, you know, and to reflect that. So this is what it's about for me. Is like this diversity, the stories, and bringing together this wonderful, you know, human being that was a trailblazer for a lot of other Chicano performers that we need to give credit to. So Ruben Sr., like just a quick question about, because you didn't really talk about like growing up, like where did you grow up and how was it? Were there a lot of Mexicans there? Or like what was your experience, you know, as a kid and in high school? Is that when you became involved in music and singing? Like how did you even get in? Like talk to us a little bit about that childhood, like K-12 experience.
Yeah, I was born in Boyle Heights in 1942. My father was a musician as well, and he was always on the road, so I went to live with my nana, with my grandmother, in a barrio in Santa Monica called La Veinte. It's on 20th Street and Olympic. So I grew up in a Mexican neighborhood. I spoke Spanish only. There was also African American and also Japanese American in the community, but I mainly knew it was mainly Chicanos, Mexican American. I started school. I had to learn English. I started elementary school there in Santa Monica. Then my dad got a gig in Palm Springs. So we moved out there. I went to school there a couple of years, learned English. No Mexicans. There was only one Mexican kid in my class. His father was a gardener. I remember that. Good kid. And from there, we moved around. My dad was, like I said, a musician. We lived in Seattle. We lived in Las Vegas. But I finally wound up in Sun Valley for high school. I went to Polytechnic for a while. Then my mother found a home. We got a home on the border of Sun Valley and North Hollywood. So I went to North Hollywood High School, basically all white. The only kids of color there was some Mexican kids and there was some Japanese American kids. So I hung out with them. We had a car club called the Apollos. And in high school, I started singing doo-wop. I formed a group called the first was the Van Tiers, then it was the Apollo Brothers. We did the high school dances, high school parties. And we were doing R&B, rock and roll, doo-wop. Let me go back. In the 50s, I started playing trumpet. I became pretty good at that. I was in the California All-Youth Symphony at I was 14 years old. So I studied classical trumpet. So I had musical background. I didn't really know I was going to go into music. But I had aspirations. Because my father was very encouraging. He paid for my lessons and all. Then the family broke up in Vegas. And got real sour on the trumpet and my dad and all that. So I became a rock and roller, R&B. I just rebelled against. I didn't know about. Of course, I wanted to make a record. We did make a record after high school, and we did play it on. Like I said, we played all over. Even did some TV shows back in '62. But my father was a friend of Sinatra. Yeah, when my dad played in Palm Springs, there's a club there that Frank could go to, and this is when he was on his down skids. He'd get drunk, and my dad would. In fact, he would sing with my dad's band, and they became friends. And when Frank opened up the Sands Hotel in Vegas, I got an audition there and got a gig there. So Frank got him a gig at the Vegas because Frank was one of the owners of that hotel. Getting back to your question, I really came back more into the Mexican community identity after I took Chicano studies for one, and then going to Mexico on that pilgrimage. And that's when I really decided I wanted to put my work on the Chicano experience. And I'm still there. I've got a new book coming out next year. I don't know, summer, fall. It's a collection of my writings. It's the short's called Funkahuatl Speaks. Funkahuatl is my alter ego persona. He's the Aztec god of funk, if you can dig it. So it's called Funkahuatl Speaks, LA Stories, Poems, and Memories. It'll be out in the fall. So check that out. Check out my other book, Confessions of a Radical Chicano Doo-Wop Singer. You get all the information there about my background. And that's about it.
All right, that's great. Oh, Chris? Okay, we have some online questions. Go ahead, take it away, Chris.
Yes, it's for Ruben Sr.
Oh, can you give him the mic?
Okay, for Ruben Sr., what were some challenges you faced being one of the first brown acts on television?
I didn't really think about that much because I know I was a good singer. And I know I could kick ass. I had a long history, but by the time I got to Shindig. And I also wanted to make an impression on Tina, to be honest. So I really sang my ass off on that show. I really never, I guess I'm just confident in my ability.
Tina Turner?
Tina Turner, yeah. Anybody know who Tina Turner is? I don't know if you know that person, but she's a great singer. She passed away recently.
Yeah.
And I believe in my talent. The obstacles, I just broke through them. And like I told Zappa, when he said, hey, build your own roads, that's what I do. I don't think about obstacles. I just do my thing. And let my talent carry me through, one way or another, by any means possible.
JP Moby.
Okay, I think we have another question. But do we have another question online? Okay, there's a follow-up question. And if anybody else has a question, just raise your hand. Remember, extra credit. She has extra credit to give away because she has so many questions.
Jeez.
I'm probably gonna ask for some. Go ahead.
Oh my God, I need to remember. Sorry, I'm like blinking out today.
That's all right. That's right, because he got arrested. She's an activist.
So sorry. How do you deal with
Who's this question for?
just in general, anybody can answer. So with Hollywood media, I heard that there was like you worked like this is for Rubén Jr., but mainly, but you mentioned that you worked for like white media and like before, and how would you what would you say for people to like for them to like who wants to like work with authenticity, you know, to say like, oh, like I want to express my culture. What would you say for them to like work in the Hollywood industry like that, if that makes sense?
You know, I think it just comes down to like, is there a story that you personally want to tell? Find any means necessary to go out and do it. Like, even though I had worked on these big productions, I was at the very, very like low end of the totem pole. Like, I thought I was going to get fired every day. Because like one time I was like 1 minute late to set. And that's kind of the environment that it's supposed to foster. You're supposed to feel disposable. I think the film industry is going through a very strange time right now because of COVID and productions just moving overseas in general. But what I knew I could do, because my dad had written a book, that was the media right there that I could take to people and say, like, look, there's already a story here. We just have to figure out how we can tell this book in 60 minutes. And so he had also done a play in 2016 that was the basis for his book, which his writing partner and the director, who was Japanese American, going back to those cross-cultural connections, which was performed at Casa 0101, basically broke down his life into 3 acts, right? And so my dad's life, which doesn't quite come across in the documentary, but if you watch his one-man show, it's just this. It's a roller coaster of just highs and lows, punctuated by these phone calls that he gets where he's basically given the worst news of his life. And then he finds ways to pick up the pieces because he taps into his cultural network and realizes that, like, oh, wait, Hollywood has closed the door on me, but I have these really amazing, talented friends that like live next to me or that I'm seeing down the street at a taqueria. What can we do together that's like rascuache, just that we can do in our garages? And that spirit, I think, has peppered the Chicano movement. I mean, definitely in the 90s, I don't know about now, and like people don't even really use the word Chicano. It's kind of like Latin or Latinx or Chicanx or Latine now. The X has been taken out. So there's been many different manifestations of Mexican American identity, but just find people that are really hungry to do something, that aren't just talking about it, that you can see like we're really put in the time and the effort to make something good, because none of us made any money from this film. We all worked over like crazy overtime to get this done on KCT's schedule. We had 8 months to put it together, to shoot it and edit it. But out of that labor, we were nominated for an Emmy, and that really helped all of us kind of continue in the documentary space. So if you find someone in your life that wants to make art and that is committed to telling an important story, because really it just comes down to the story you all want to tell together, you know, find, you know, that passion is contagious. So if you can find that with someone else, even if they're not that established, I've worked with crew members that had 2 credits to their names and have just gone on to do like really incredible things because one specific project put them on the map. But I picked them because they were really excited to work on something. So find, you know, sniff that excitement out. Be committed to whatever, perspective that you have and story you want to tell, and you will find a way to make it happen.
Oh, you have a question? Okay, one more question here, and then one over here. Go ahead.
Okay, so the next question online is, what is the line?
Who is it for?
Oh, it is, it's a general one.
Okay,
Yeah.
senior.
Okay, so what is the line of cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation when other ethnicities are learning about the Chicano culture?
Respect. You gotta respect the culture. Okay. When I was a student at UCLA, I had a Native American teacher. At the time, I was doing performance art, and I was doing a lot of ceremonial ritual stuff with building copal for directions and stuff like that. My performances were ritualistic. Even when I was talking about Chicano experience. So I took this class from this Native American teacher, and I know Gigama. He's a Kiowa from Oklahoma. And I asked him right straight up, hey, can I be doing this? Is this okay? If I'm borrowing from Native culture, I do have roots, but I wasn't raised in the culture. He says, as long as you do it with respect. Respect is the bottom line. And don't abuse it. Don't use it for, unworthy ambition. Use it respectfully. So that's it.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a question over here. So let me just add to that. For example, like if you go to Japan, not that I've ever been, but I saw it online, because online doesn't lie. There's like literally there's Japanese that dress like gang members and cholos and like drive lowriders. To me, that's respect, because they're doing it with respect, right? They're embracing that. Or like if you see African Americans driving lowriders, that comes from the Chicanos. If you see the Chicanos, listening to Marvin Gaye, so it's about respect, right? So it's about that cross-cultural respect. Over in the back. Oh, you had to click.
Just real quick, I came up about Japan being enamored with Chicano culture. This album, I produced this, it's a compilation of Chicano music, Chicano rockers from '83. This album wound up in Tokyo. And that ignited the whole Chicano movement in Tokyo, this album. I had no idea. One of the guys that was very involved with producing lowrider shows and bringing Chicano artists over there, Shin Miyata, he found this record in a record store.
Wow.
Here in Tokyo. So he was so blown away by the artwork. It's a mural by Willie Avon and Willie Avon and Grant, two famous Chicano artists. And he picked up the album. He came to East LA College to study Spanish and Chicano culture, went back to Japan and started this whole Chicano movement over there. So
that's the album that I had at UCLA. I need it back because I think I lost it.
This one, Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, well, this is started in Japan, believe it or not.
I'm gonna have to. If it goes missing, you know who took it. Over there in the back. This will be the last question.
This question is for Ruben Sr. During the years of the music and film.
I'm sorry, can you speak louder, please?
During the years of music and film, and which part was the pinnacle of your success from the genesis of the career you have?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand it.
Um.
Oh.
What are you most proud of?
Getting the Emmy nomination that my son got for the documentary on my life. That was it for me. That's been it so far. Well, okay, I worked with Cheech and Chong, and I wrote music for one of the movies. I think that was creatively, that was one of the highlights. I still get royalties for that, thank God. So that was cool. But my son picking up the mantle and picking up the torch and lighting it up for, my legacy was really the ultimate for me. And He's a great filmmaker.
Just add to the appropriation appreciation question.
Yeah, why don't you come up here and then you can just wrap it up?
Yeah. Is that question is actually pertains to the new project I'm working on, and if anyone is curious to see like a perfect manifestation of that, is this rapper from Kyoto, Japan. Her name is Mona, aka Sad Girl. She's about like 5'1" and is like a badass female Chicana rapper who raps in Spanish, English, and Japanese. And she got inspired by a film called Mi Vida Loca, which somehow made its way to Japan in the 90s. And that, there's a whole bunch of things that kind of proliferated that culture being out there. And it is fascinating how they really identify with the tenets of Chicano culture. They don't understand the full story of oppression because Japan's a very different country. It doesn't have the kind of wealth disparities that we have here, which is kind of how, the Chicano identity manifestation took place. But the people out there do get accused of appropriation a lot. And they wear tattoos. You're not even allowed to get into an onsen if you have tattoos. So already they're making sacrifices for it, and they feel like a lot of them are estranged from their own families in Japan. Being like touchy and like super loving all the time. It's not really a cultural norm there. So they found like hanging with their homies is a thing that brings them those connections that they're unable to get from their own immediate family. So for them, I think it's about it is a respect, but it's also finding community and finding people that care about each other and creating their own familia together. So if you're able to do any outside research, maybe Alvaro can make this an extra credit thing, but look up Mona, aka Sad Girl, and all the people that she works with. It's fascinating, and it's still huge over there right now.
All right, people, with that, muchas gracias, and see y'all next week. Applause.